In this video, I'm going to teach you how to read these panic logs so you can solve 3-minute restart problems. This is a really easy thing to do if you just spend a few minutes so you can learn what keywords to look out for and what you need to do to troubleshoot and solve the problem. Now, if you want to support the channel, I would recommend you guys check out my locals community, which I will link down below, which gives you access to my panic log cheat sheets. These are just a bunch of notes of the solutions that I found. But if you want a free version as well, there's a repair wiki. I've also documented the stuff there, which is provided by Louis Rossman, but I will link to everything down below in the video description. And if you need your device repaired, we do offer mail-in service for these type of restart problems and some other problems like motherboard repair, data recovery, and iPad repair. So let's go ahead and get started with this video. So let's go through a real-life example of a panic log. Now, to find these panic logs is really easy. You don't need any tools or anything. Just go to the phone, go to your settings, scroll down to privacy, and then on privacy, you want to scroll down to analytics and improvements, and then you go to analytics data, and then you're going to scroll down and find the file that starts with the words panic full. This specific phone does not have one, but this is what you'll find. You're going to see a list of files like this, and you want to go to the furthest one at the bottom, which is going to be the newest one. So you're going to see it says panic full, and then it's going to be a date and time. So find the latest one, and then when you open it up, it's going to look like this. The part that has the solution is just going to be that top portion. You don't need to read through the whole thing. It just is in this top portion. And really what you want to look for on 12 and older is the section that says missing sensors. So if you dig through here, you're going to find it right here. It says missing sensors, and then it has something after it. Mic 2. So mic 2 is telling us which part is causing the problem. And if you read what it says, missing sensors, mic 2, that's saying the phone is not detecting the mic 2 and it's going to restart. For whatever reason, Apple coded the operating system to do this. When it doesn't detect that sensor, it's going to restart. So you can't just unplug the part you think is problematic. You got to plug in a working one. And that's the key thing to solving these problems. I see a lot of people saying like they kind of got an idea what to do. They'll see it says mic 2 and they'll unplug it and hope that it fixes it. That does not work anymore. Starting on the iPhone 10 and newer, there are certain parts that just need to be plugged in and a sensor on that part to be communicating with the phone. And if it doesn't, it's going to restart. So no longer you can solve problems by just unplugging potential problematic parts. Now there's some parts that have to be plugged in to work. So this 11 Pro needs the mic 2 to be working for it to work. So what to do? If your mic 2 doesn't work, you replace the flex with the premium part. I don't recommend you use aftermarkets because those have high defect rates. So you're gonna get a new high quality part. I recommend OEM, if not at least premium from a reputable dealer. Now some other sensors that might go missing here on these panic logs is mic 1, which usually refers to a charging port flex. PRS0, that refers to the charging port flex as well. So for example, this is an iPhone XS charging port flex, and in this flex there's multiple functions. So I also see a lot of people who say, oh, I don't think it's the flex because it's charging fine. Well, the charging part of the flex might be fine, but the sensors on here are not. So if you look closely, there's a little thing here on the left. That thing is a pressure sensor, and for whatever reason, the iPhone needs to talk to it in order for it to work. And this is the mic 1. So these things are damaged, which is really common with water damage, with back glass repair. The flex is damaged, or even a drop that can tear that flex in that drop and damage it, and then you'll have 3-minute restart problem. If this fails, that doesn't stop the charging on working here, as these parts disconnected from the rest of the flex. It's not going to cause not charging. It's going to cause 3-minute restart because those sensors are not detected. Now another common one is missing sensors TGOB. So this is iPhone XR and it has the same message, missing sensors. It actually cuts across 2 lines. So make sure you guys are paying attention. Like I said, this is going to be in the first section of the panic log. And then you'll see here TGOB. TGOB refers to the battery data lines. This one gets a little more complicated. It's not always parts issues. So TGOB is going to be basically find the battery connector, and it's going to be these data lines. So if these things get damaged, whether it's the battery connector gets warped, so the battery side of it doesn't plug in and make contact with these pins and is not communicating to the motherboard, that can cause TGOB or TGOV. On certain models, there's a MOSFET that gets knocked off and disconnects that line. So when you measure it, you get an OL on one or both. That will cause TGOB, or it could just be a defective battery. So if the battery is defective, it cannot communicate with the motherboard, therefore the phone is going to restart. Now, one common thing we see a lot after iPad repairs is people will insert their metal tool or whatever tool under the battery connector to disconnect the board from the battery. So these are stacked on top of each other. So there's a battery and then the board, but the connector has these pins sticking out. And a lot of people stick their tool in there and bend those pins. So they'll damage one of these 3 pins. These are the data pins for a battery connector. And then the iPad will restart every 3 minutes because of that. Now, another common problem is people mix up the screws and put a screw that's way too long for this spot, which will cause the board to barely making contact. So the iPad can turn on, but it's not charging, and then it restarts every 3 minutes. Because of this, these data lines cannot communicate to the board. You know, these big pins are for power. This is what powers, like, provides the juice, but then separately there's these data lines. So if you see TGOB or TGOV, that's going to be data lines. So focus on the battery. Is it making good contact? Are the data pins damaged? This is what you want to look at. Now, there is some nuance to all this. On certain models, it's a little more complicated. So iPhone SE 2020, this one's notorious for 3-minute restarts. And this specific one, you'll see it says, look closely, where is it at? Right here, missing sensors. But this one says mic 1, which, like I mentioned, mic 1 typically implies the microphone on the charging port flex. But in this specific scenario, SE 2020, there's a motherboard problem that disconnects the trace for that microphone. So from the charging port goes to the charging port connector, and from there it goes to the CPU. And between the charging port connector and the CPU, there's a broken traces. So there's a video I made on how to repair that, which requires 3 long jumpers to fix, which is a whole other thing. But something to keep in mind, specific models do have specific motherboard problems causing these things. Not all of them are parts, but majority of them are. So here's a repair wiki guide on kind of that whole process and what that's like. Basically, you gotta run some jumpers from the charging port connector. It's a 2-piece picture, it goes really far. So that's specific. When you rule out parts, then it's probably going to be a motherboard problem if it's SE 2020. Another thing I forgot to mention is if you do have known good parts and it's still restarting, then you got to focus on the motherboard. What is it that is preventing that sensor on the part, on the flex, to communicate with the motherboard? So the most logical thing to do is start diode moding the connectors to see why is it not communicating. On iPhone 12 Pro Max, for example, this is the charging port connector. You'll see there's net names here on ZXW. And look, for example here, mic 1. So if you're having mic 1 issue, focus on the mic 1 lines. If you're having PRS 0 issue, on the 12 Pro Max, it's called Eiger. You see here this word, which actually there's a panic log that does bring that one out. So just something to think about, especially if you have water damage. You know, the connector on the motherboard could be corroded. So it could be that the pin that connector is on is just not making good contact, or the corrosion is causing a problem. So just keep that in mind. You know, if you ruled out parts, then focus on the connector where that part plugs in. If the connector is good, then you want to check for, you know, missing components or shorts or, you know, other stuff. So hopefully that part helps. Now, let's go to a little more difficult panic logs. So starting on the iPhone 13 series and newer, Apple changed the format of the panic logs. It's no longer going to say missing sensors. Instead, you're going to notice it starts with SMC panic, assertion failed, and then you just keep going past that, and then you'll notice sensor array. So this is kind of like missing sensors, except it's going to say sensor array, and you're going to skip through some of those characters until you find the section that says here, 0x800. That is a hex code, and that code translates to something. What you look for is sensor array, and then 0-6, and then you skip the first 0x0, and then the second one says 0x800. So this one is where the repair wiki really comes in handy, because that one has all the codes. The other ones, you can just use the words to kind of figure out the problem. Mic 1, mic 2, PRS 0, which is short for pressure sensor 0. TGOB, that one's kind of a coded word, but this one gets a little trickier and it varies by model. So this is 13 series, 0x800. You're only going to see that in the 13 series. For the 14 series, they changed the format. 15 series, they changed the format again. So keep that in mind. It's not universal starting on the 13th and newer. So let's walk through this one specifically. So go to repair.wiki, scroll down to phones, go to Apple phones, and then this is a 13 Pro. And if you look here, how to fix an iPhone 13 that randomly restarts. These codes are grouped together to that generation, so just keep that in mind. Although this is called iPhone 13, it does include 13 mini, 13 Pro, 13 Pro Max. As you see here, it labels what models it applies to. And I highly recommend spend a few minutes, read through all this, because this goes into great detail about everything about this issue. But if you want to just scroll down to the answer, you'll see here, it also explains, how to find the panic logs in the settings, and it tells you search for SMC panic assertion failed. And then here's the 0x codes. These are the hexadecimal codes that Apple encoded so that, we don't, just by looking at it, we can't figure it out. But with some troubleshooting, we were able to figure out 0x800 is the charging port flex. So it's most likely the pressure sensor as well. So if you have 0x800, you want to make sure you have a known good charging port plugged in. If you don't have a known good, your replacement should be a premium or OEM quality charging port. And if it still doesn't work, it's still restarting every 3 minutes, then you want to start, like I said, check the connector that this plugs into, diode mode it, check for any water damage, try to trace down starting from that path. Now here's some other codes for the 13. If you ever see 0x1000 is the proximity flex. This is the flex cable that's on the screen, that's on the top. And then if you have both issues, the charging port and the proximity flex, then add those together, which creates 0x1800. Now the 13 mini specifically, if you get 0x400, that's going to be a sandwich issue. The 13 mini, for whatever reason, needs the gyroscope IC to be working. So it's really common on this model for there's to be an issue within the motherboard that disconnects all those pads. So that's all documented here. So I highly recommend you guys bookmark the repair wiki. Like I said, this is from Louis Rossman, and he's funding for this site. So if you guys have any solutions you figure out, let's say there's a panic log that we don't have an answer to, and you figure it out, this is a great place to document it for future reference. Now, one thing I want to mention is if you're using the panic log analyzer, beware. I noticed it's very inaccurate. Look at these solutions given for this 0x800 panic log. It is not the NAND, it is not Wi-Fi, it is not the crystal, it is not the interposer. It's going to be the charging port. And I've already told the developer, but he says he's fixed it, but it's still not working. So I guess that's why I made this video, to show you guys how to read the actual panic log. All right, now let's get a little more complicated. This is a 14 Pro Max. Like I said, the codes kind of change depending on the model, starting on 13 and newer. So 14, you can see your sensor array here, and then the 0x, and then 1600000. So keep in mind, don't mix up how many numbers are here, because that's pretty important. So let's pull up the repair wiki page for this model, the 14 Pro. Now keep in mind, even within the same generation, Apple has mixed up the codes between 14 Pro and Pro Max, and iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. So keep that in mind, and the repair wiki has for each one. So this panic log says basically 160,000 for the code. So 0x160000. Go to the repair wiki, and if you scroll down, oh wow, look at that. I actually don't have this one documented. So like I said, when these panic logs get combined, then it generates the code of like adding those together. So 0x 80,000, 0x 40,000, combine those together, so proximity flex and charging port flex, you'll see here, it creates the hex code 0xC0000. So in hexadecimal, it's basically a numbering scheme where it goes from 0 to 9 and then from A to F. So it's a 16-digit kind of code instead of a 10-digit. So it's kind of programmer talk, but I bet you I know which one it is. So let's actually figure it out here live on camera. I think. I don't know. Well, the thing is, I don't know anything about this story, so I can't know if it'll fix it. But 16, like these first two numbers, how do you generate 16 out of these? So if you look, this one is pretty close. So power button and charging port flex generate 0x140000. If we want to add 2 here, look at that, there's a 2 here. So at this point, so add, let's do it live. So 140000 plus 20,000, 160,000, which matches this one here. So this guy is having power button, charging port, and a sandwich problem on his 14 Pro or Pro Max that is giving him that 160,000 panic log error. And the 14s also require the gyro chip U7300. So here's a diagram of what paths to check. So this is the IC that needs to be detected. So like I said, there's some nuance to this, but if you just put a little bit of effort, it's really easy. And this is all documented on the repair wiki, also on my cheat sheet. So if you guys want to get access to that, it's a little simpler to see, but it's all the same information. Now a harder one. So this is an iPhone 15 Pro. Let's take a look. Sensor array, and this one here, 600,000. 612 and 123, yeah, so 600,000. So let's pull up the solutions for the 15 Pro series, and 600,000 is not here. So this is a 15 Pro Max that I personally unplugged one part at a time and then just ran the timer and try to see which one causes any restart. These are the ones I was able to duplicate. So 0x300,000 was a charging port flex. So basically I unplugged the charging port flex, had everything else plugged in, and then ran the timer, it restarted, checked the panic log, and I saw this one. And then repeat the same process, plug the charging port flex back in, unplug the wireless charging flex, and then got this panic log, and so on. So in this case, 600,000, I don't know what this one means. That means someone has to figure out what causes this code to be generated, and the only way to do it is just troubleshooting. So just use your brain, try different parts. Maybe the 15 Pro does need the proximity flex as opposed to the 15 Pro Max does not. I personally tested the 15 Pro Max with the proximity flex unplugged and it ran for hours. And by the way, for the 15 Pro Max, 0xA1 is a bad battery. So I personally ran into this and was able to solve it by just replacing the battery. But it's like I said, this is a battery data line issue. So in my case, it was a bad battery, but in other cases, it might be the connector, it might be the, like a resistor got knocked off or something, or a MOSFET. So just keep that in mind. The battery ones, it does require a little more troubleshooting, but it's pretty easy once you know what to look for. So now let's go to one more that I saw in my group today. This is more obscure panic log. So it's not gonna be like the missing sensors or the sensor array. This one is a little more obscure. So what I mean is not gonna be as clear, but if you remember what I mentioned earlier, there's the word Eiger. Eiger is the PRS0 sensor that's on the charging port flex. So this one is most likely that. So you'll need to replace the flex and confirm the issue. And if you just browse my Facebook group, it's just full of panic logs because people do not put any effort into learning how to read them. So hopefully this video you guys found helpful. It looks like I did run a lot longer than I was expecting, but I went into great detail. And if you guys are enjoying these videos, You guys like me going over things like this? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, I want to hear what you guys learned in today's video. Did you watch all the way to the end? Let me know down below. And if you have a panic log that you don't know what it means, I recommend you post it in my Facebook group, and do not message me for it because I am not your personal assistant to answer these for you. So if you guys want the cheat sheet, I will link it down below. The repair wiki is also down below. Also, I will link to this t-shirt if you want to support my channel. You know, these videos do take a lot of work to make, so appreciate all you guys who stuck around here till the end. I'll see you guys in the next one.